Hello, everybody. Welcome to Buckeye Weekly Instant Reaction postgame from Ohio State, Michigan State. Buckeyes win 26-6. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, it was a very beautiful game throughout. There were no offensive struggles for the Buckeyes. They were pristine. They punted okay. Defense came to play. In the postgame, I heard somebody wanting to ask Urban Meyer if this was a big win. And I'm thinking it's a road win in the Big Ten against a ranked opponent. Of course it's a big win, but they were also helped out greatly by Michigan State's complete inability to throw the ball.
Right. This was, like you said, not a thing of beauty. This is not one that the playoff committee, if they're watching it, is going to say, aha, this team, we have to get these guys in. But at this point in the season, a win is a win. And to go on the road, Michigan State's offense is not good. Capital N, capital G, not good. But Ohio State's defense has made a lot of not very good offenses look pretty darn good this year. So to come in on the road in the Big Ten, hold an opponent to 6 points, that's a monumental step forward.
Well, and we've said, what you would like to see is what you are supposed to see. And that's what we saw from Ohio State's defense today. We saw what they should have done against an offense that doesn't run the ball well. They held them today to 54 yards rushing with a long of 47 coming from Rocky Lombardi. So that's a pretty good day when the running backs do nothing against you. And the quarterbacks were, I think they were open receivers at times, but they weren't, they couldn't connect. So it was a defensive performance that you should have seen, and so that's what you got, so you should be happy with that. When you look at what Michigan did here, they won 21-7. Mm-hmm. What's that, 14 points, Tom?
Yeah, roughly.
Roughly. Round up. And then, Ohio State wins by 20. So, transitive property. Ohio State should be a 4-point favorite in 2 weeks against Michigan, right?
I mean, a 20-point win instead of a 14-point win, that seems more like a 6-point favorite, but I'm also not sure that's how it works, but that's okay.
You don't expect correct math when we're doing things incorrectly. But, what you saw from the defense, what Urban Meyer said he liked most was the tackling. They were sound tackles, and Brendan White was in there, so of course you're going to be tackling well. Tuff Borland had a good game. Pete Werner, and I'm sorry to say this, but led the team in tackling. Even when he is taken completely out of the play, when he has to defend receivers at the bottom and the top of the field and he's not going to be involved at all, he was still involved enough to lead the team in tackles. But I still think the defensive player of the game, is it Terry McLaurin or is it Drew Crispin? Because, Draymond Jones said after the game that those two guys were the reason they were able to do what they did on defense.
Yeah, and Brad asked that question. It still concerns on offense and defense, but Crispin and McLaurin is the best combination Ohio State has going, and it's true. I mean, you think back to the Sugar Bowl against Alabama, where J.K. Scott just kept flipping the field, and if you're an Ohio State fan, you're pulling your hair out. Like, how can this guy keep doing this? This was the Drew Crispin show today, and there are all sorts of reasons that statistically punting inside your opponent's 40 is not a smart play, but it worked out just fine today for Ohio State.
Seems smart today, Tom.
We can have a long process versus results discussion, but that's not probably particularly exciting.
With the way he was punting, I wanted to make like a J.K. Scott, Drew Crispin, like J.K. Crispin tweet, but it would totally have gone over people's heads because of the running back at Ohio State. Mm-hmm. And plus, it's really not that great of a tweet. And, I only do like A+ material in Twitter as we're just randomly typing stuff. Only the best for Twitter.
Anything that's not like A++, you just lean over and whisper to me, you should tweet this. And then I do. That's how it works.
Right. And then I take credit for it if people like it.
Exactly.
But what was it? So 5 punts inside the 6-yard line in the second half, all in a row. And it's just completely demoralizing to Michigan State. We haven't seen what Mark D'Antonio had to say about it, but it can't feel good. And what Dwayne Haskins said in those situations, as a quarterback, you got to get rid of the ball as quickly as possible because, one, you don't want to get sacked. Two, you don't want any holding or anything like that. So they were constantly in a state of oh dear God, we have to get rid of this football. We have to, and not only do you have to get rid of the football, like what I think Dwayne Haskins said, the goal is 2 first downs so that you can punt and try to turn the field a little bit. So you've got a lot of pressure when that ball is backed up like they are to not only not go backwards, but then you've got this goal of, let's get 2 first downs so that we can punt. And the other stat that maybe Dwayne Haskins said was, when your offense starts inside the 5, they score on 3% of those drives. Mm-hmm. So that's part of their plan to win, and they executed that bigly today.
Yeah, if you can pin that opponent deep, and then you actually hold them, that's great. Because Ohio State in the last month or so has had times when they've pinned the opponent deep and then given up a 97-yard touchdown drive. Today they did give up an 8-play, 74-yard drive after they pinned Michigan State at the 6, but Michigan State settled for a field goal in that one. And if you don't give up touchdowns, that goes a long way towards winning.
And as poorly as they execute throwing the ball today, you feel pretty good about the third downs that they aren't going to go 90 yards and score a touchdown, because even if they go 88 and then get down to inside the 10, they still have to finish that out, and they weren't too good at that today.
That's easier to do when you have some confidence that you're not going to give up a 93-yard touchdown pass too. The safety play, there's a little bit of a how much do you want to credit Brendan White versus how much do you want to credit Michigan State being terrible throwing the football. But they have played some not very good teams this year and given up some very long touchdowns. Yeah. So there is almost unquestionably, I think, Brendan White is looks the best of anyone that they have played opposite Jordan Fuller at safety this year. Yeah, you wonder what the defense would look like with Isaiah Pryor there. I think we know what it would look like with Jocelyn Wint. Mm-hmm. But it's undeniably better. I still, if I'm going to credit Michigan State or Ohio State, it might be 65-35 Michigan State's offense to Ohio State's defense. One of the things Draymond Jones said was that, we knew things would come around. I think it was Draymond Jones saying, this proves what we're doing is correct. And I don't know that that's true. And that struck me as, if you think that's true, then you're going to find out soon that it's not. Because, it's little things, yes, but he also said those little things are still happening. So after 10 games, they're not little anymore. That's just how you exist. Right. And if they're not fixed, I don't even think they know how to fix them. And it's not going to stop. And to think that, just by process of, we'll just keep doing it and see, now we're fine because it worked against Michigan State. It's wrong. Right. It's unquestionably better. And better is a massive improvement, because that looked like an Ohio State defense. Mm-hmm. That looked like what an Ohio State defense would do against a bad offense. This is maybe the first time since Rutgers that you felt like that looked like an Ohio State defense. And Rutgers, everything with Rutgers kind of comes with an asterisk that, it's Rutgers. Congratulations. They put up 7 on Michigan in the first half today. Yeah, congratulations. You beat the game on JV difficulty. Well done. This is not, against an offense that bad, you can't really definitively prove anything good about your defense, but you can prove something bad, and they didn't prove anything bad about their defense today. Yeah, the whole thing where you can't lose it in April, but you can't win it in April, but you can lose it. That whole thing. Yeah. And they certainly didn't prove anything poorly, and they did what they should have done. It also gives them a ton of confidence. Is one of the other things they were talking about coming out of this game. Defensively, they're playing better, so they're feeling better about how they're playing, and I think it was Draymond said that they hear what people say, and so there is some of that negativity that they hear. Maybe they want to prove it wrong, or maybe it fires them up a little bit. So they came out here and did exactly what a good defense should do, and it's been a while, like you said, since we've seen it. So it was good to see that they're still capable of it, and that defense is still in there. But man, those two quarterbacks were not. Lewerke was 11 for 28, Rocky Lombardi 7 for 19, and
Buckeyes did have some good coverage on a lot of those throws and some PBUs and just good coverage, but it wasn't all of them. And there were some throws that were just uncatchable.
Right. This was, I think, before the game, we compared this to the 2007 Ohio State-Michigan game where, in that case, Chad Henne came in with a bum shoulder and you kind of knew Michigan wasn't going to throw it so they could just sit on the run. And, they tried to throw it and nothing good happened for Michigan that day. This was very similar to that, where it was kind of a combination of Chad Henne with the bum shoulder, and then Rocky Lombardi comes in, and he's a little bit of a John O'Corn, if we're going to keep the Michigan quarterback theme going. And it was not going to be accurate. And if you can't complete passes, the defense can just sit up on that run. And if you can't run and you can't pass, you're pretty much running out of ways to move the ball down the field. Remember where we are.
And so then Rocky Lombardi comes in, and it gave them a boost. And you saw right away that, with the 47-yarder, and the first play that he threw was downfield. Kendall Sheffield tripped, and I think it would have been an interception or at least a broken up pass. He goes up to jump, he trips, catch, 27 yards. Michigan State's got this boost, but they just can't hold on to it, and they couldn't. And we're looking at these 18 rushes. Now, a couple of those are sacks, I assume, but 6 carries for the running backs in a game that was 7-6 at the half, or 7-3 at the half.
Yeah.
And didn't get out of hand until late, and they just had no belief that they could run the ball. And I don't know, they should have had no belief that they could throw it as well, but maybe you take a couple of shots and something happens. But this was just a really, really poor offense, and I could see something like next week where Maryland doubles up on Michigan State's yardage just because Michigan State is so bad, and you wonder if Ohio State will there be a false sense of accomplishment or security that they're back and things are fixed because. You feel good about what you did in this win, and it's always feel good about a road win. But don't make more of this defensively than what it is, and it's a JV offense.
Yeah, it is. It is a JV offense, and I mean the first half of that game looked like what one of us, and I don't want to say which one, but one of us asked when the varsity game was going to start during the first half. It looked like two teams that were throwing the ball, couldn't complete a pass. And when you can't complete a pass, the other team sits on the run, and no one can move the ball, and it's a whole lot of punts, and it's real sloppy, and both teams looked completely just scattered in the first half. It was bizarre.
Well, and that's why we were talking during the game, or maybe before the game, about Tate Martell, getting him some snaps, because this was the game we expected, where did we talk about? I think we talked about it even before the game, like on the show. But knowing that you're not going to get everything, or that there's not going to be a lot of points scored, and there's going to be a lot of, I guess, wasted possessions, it would be okay to waste a possession on Tate Martell, but that didn't happen. We finally got to see him come in his red zone package that I had really assumed was not going to happen. I thought they liked what they did last week, although, we talked before the game, they have to do something different than what they did last week in the red zone, even if they're adding on to something to that jumbo package. And they did something different. They brought in Tate Martell. And before the game, I was watching him, and he was like jumping around and, like he expected, or looking back, it seems like now maybe he knew he was playing, so he was more involved in just the pregame stuff. But it was good to see him out there against a team that wasn't Tulane. And it's a big-time Big Ten game and in his first action, and he didn't screw up.
Yeah, he didn't screw up, and for all the things that we've said, kind of slagging on the Michigan State offense, Michigan State's defense is no joke.
Yeah.
And especially against the run. So, I mean, he got extremely limited opportunities in the game today. The first snap he got, they were on the 6, and he ran it down to the 1. Which I can't remember the last time Ohio State had a 5-yard rush in the red zone. It seems like when I went back and looked a week or two ago,
it's been a while.
It was 1 yard, 2 yards, -1, 2, J.K. Dobbins might have had one that was 5, but then a whole bunch of 1s and 2s. So to get 5 yards was like, wow. And then they immediately pulled him, and J.K. Dobbins tried to vault in from the 3-yard line and got stuffed. They refused to stick with something that, something just worked. Why don't you try it again?
And then I wanted him to keep it on there at the end and get in there just for his own, you've come this far, you've stuck it out, you've been patient, let him have a little reward. But unselfishly, he didn't keep those. Right. He was handing them off, and I think the one time they go empty was the bad snap and the turnover, and they finally called a play for him. Maybe it was the QB power.
It certainly, the direction the snap was going, I wondered if he was going to run a sweep to the right, and the snap was supposed to lead him a little bit or something, and they let him too much. I don't know, but it reminded me of in 2002, Ohio State was at Wisconsin, and came out and lined up with Maurice Clarett alone in the backfield. And I think it went 5 wide, and Clarett was alone in the Wildcat. And I was like, oh, man, what's going to happen now? And they had either Wisconsin called a timeout or there's a procedure penalty or something like that. And I don't think you ever saw it again. It was like, well, but no, do the exciting thing that everyone's excited to see. And then they didn't do it again. So I obviously, I would assume you're going to see more Tate Martell next
Urban
week.
Said so.
And you're going to see more Tate Urban says a lot of stuff.
That's true.
I assume you're going to see, I think I enunciated it correctly that time. I assume you're going to see Martell against Maryland and against Michigan. It'll be interesting to see whether they use him more, whether they have other stuff off of that. It certainly is something that you want to make other teams prepare for, because that's a whole different offense. You can run essentially your offense, but the other team has to prepare for a whole different thing, just because Ohio State's offense works one way with a quarterback that doesn't run. If there's a quarterback that can run, that's a whole different ballgame.
And when he came in that first time, they weren't huddling, but they were still, walking up to the line, and he was off to the left of where the quarterback would be. It was almost like he was trying to hide a little bit, so people wouldn't recognize him until later. But you talk about putting him up there against Michigan, and that, to me, that would be fun to watch. I don't know how fun it'll be for him, but you have to have as many weapons as you can. And as Urban says, if he's one of our best, we've got to get him out there. And, finally we're starting to see more of that. Dwayne Haskins said it's kind of frustrating, though, to be pulled out in situations like that. But it doesn't seem to me that it would be any different than a quarterback handing the ball off. Because you're just there to hand the ball off. So you're not involved in that play. So you're like being pulled out of that play when it's a run called. So what's the difference if somebody else is handing the ball off?
I don't know. I mean, I guess there's in the same way that the run threat is different when he's in there, the pass threat's different when he's in there. Not that they're throwing the ball downfield at all, but
I just mean his feelings.
Yeah.
You're not involved in a run play that you're handing off.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, sure.
Quarterbacks, divas, man. So he was 24 for 39. Not bad. 227, 1 touchdown, sacked twice, no interceptions, had a couple errant throws, a couple of drops, some bad drops. Receivers were getting open, especially early on, and he was just missing some throws. So that was encouraging as well, where you thought if they can just put it together, they'll be okay. They had their 2 final drives in the first half, like 10 plays for 54 or 55 yards. The other was 11 plays for like 54 or 55 yards. Got 10 points out of those. So you felt like they're moving, or not 10 points, but they missed because they missed a field goal. But they were going in the right direction. They showed that they could move it. And then eventually in the second half, the Michigan State defense wears down. Mike Weber, I didn't even realize he had 100 yards rushing until Urban said it after the game.
It didn't seem like it, did it? The first half, it just seemed like run for -1 yard, run for -2 yards. Why do they keep running Mike Weber? Nothing's happening. And then all of a sudden, and it wasn't like he had a 87-yard run.
No, 18-yard long.
Yeah, they just kind of ground them down over the course of the game. I mean, this is what happened to Michigan State against Michigan.
Yeah.
The offense couldn't stay on the field, and then eventually the defense just wears out because they don't have the depth that Ohio State does along that line. They don't have the depth in other spots. So you can, if you're running the ball, pounding the ball. I mean, Ohio State ran it 45 times today and threw 39 passes. So, that's 84 snaps, and 45 of them are on the ground, and that's a lot. That's just, that is 36 rushes for the Ohio State running backs. You keep running them, you keep pounding them. Eventually, the offensive line starts leaning on them, starts pushing them a little bit, and then it ends.
I wonder what the record is all time of teams where one team's running backs have 30 more carries than the other team's running backs. Like, is that 98% winning percentage? Because you assume there's like some Mike Leach stuff in there where they didn't run the ball much and they still won. But if you can run the ball, your running backs run the ball 30 more times than the opposing running backs, you're going to do all right. The Michigan State defense had 4 guys with at least 10 tackles, which tells you that Ohio State controlled the ball. They controlled the clock, 37 minutes, 29 seconds of possession. So they were on the field a long time, which is why defensive end Kenny Willekes, who dominated like the first quarter of action and maybe the entire first half, but eventually faded a little bit, and the pass protection got better as the defensive line got more tired. Early on, though, it did not look good for Thayer Munford was having trouble, Isaiah Prince was having trouble, and then you look towards Michigan's defensive line, and you can put the math together, and it's not great.
It's not great, and the problem, especially against Michigan, is now the solution is, well, you just keep a tight end in and block, keep it running back in and block, and okay, that's fine. That works against Michigan State if you do that. Against Michigan, then you're only sending a couple guys out in pass patterns, and Michigan has a couple good cornerbacks that can cover those top 2 guys. So then no one's open, and then you got a whole different problem.
Yeah, and it's not like Dwayne Haskins can extend the play.
Right.
That's why you have all of these quick passes, which maybe is the way to go with them. But it seemed early on like all they could do was slant because they don't have Austin Mack to move the chains. And I kept waiting for a linebacker to jump on that slant and pick it off, and that never happened. So I guess that's good for the Buckeyes. But 9 tackles for loss for Michigan State. So they were getting into the backfield in the first half. I wonder how many of those are first half stats. But just like last week, the opposing defense got worn down by the Ohio State offense, which is what used to happen before this year. And they weren't doing much no huddle, or not. They were always doing no huddle, but not much tempo. There were even times when Michigan State was substituting defenders when Ohio State wasn't, just because Ohio State wasn't moving fast enough to keep them from doing that. And even substituting defenders, they still wore down. And I wonder, what did Mike Weber rush for in the fourth quarter, 50 yards or something?
I'm just looking right now. At halftime, Mike Weber had 3 rushes for 3 yards. And then in the second half, he had 19 rushes for 101 yards. So
good.
If you can do that for a whole game, that's something Ohio State has not had at all this year, really.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if they go back to that, see why that worked and how that propels them forward. We're already talking about Michigan, but there is still Maryland to play. They're a football team as well. They can do some things offensively, which will put a strain on this defense. They'll spread the Buckeyes out, which is where they struggle. That's why we both thought, you condense everything, you make things easier on the Buckeyes, and they did that. Michigan does that, but they can also do everything else. It's similar to Jim Trussell when he had Troy Smith and Terrell Pryor, in that, I'm going to run I formation a lot, but I'm also sometimes going to go 4 wide with a quarterback who can run the ball, and you're still going to have to respect all of that. So Michigan State today played right into Ohio State's defensive hands, but they probably won't have that the rest of the year.
I don't think so. Maryland, no. Maryland has running quarterbacks.
Yeah, they can't throw the ball, but they can do other things.
But they can do other things. Michigan, like you said, if they go to the Rose Bowl and play Washington State, you're not. That is not an I formation. Very famously, that is not an I formation running team. This is a team that plays into Ohio State's hands this year a little bit, and this is unfortunately for Ohio State the last one of these that they're going to get. But just to see them do what they did today, even if it is against a but kind of offense,
right.
That's still pretty big.
And they come out of this game with confidence. And this is two games this is the second game in November where Dwayne Haskins hasn't been great, but he's been better than past quarterbacks against good opponents. And I put Nebraska in there as a good opponent, probably because I'm crazy and I'm not very smart. But they're better than, the two wins that they were. He throws for, is it his second consecutive worst game ever, but it's still better than most November games in Ohio State history for a quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, it was, right, it was 24 for 39, 227 yards and a touchdown. Now, there were a couple times that you kind of went, oh, that was almost an interception.
Yeah.
And then there was also, it looked like the same play that they ran for a touchdown to Johnny Dixon against Nebraska. They ran it again. Ball hit Johnny Dixon right in the number, and he didn't hang on to it, but that could have been another touchdown for 50 yards. So then,
the opportunity was there to set the record,
the
OSU record today, even with a couple of completions. There was one down here in the first quarter to Ben Victor, like right away, that was overthrown because he was completely uncovered.
Yeah.
Then they said the conditions really didn't affect them that much. I don't know. It was cold walking in, Tom.
It was real cold walking in. On the field before the game, it seemed like it had warmed up a decent amount. And I think the biggest thing was the wind settled down. Coming in, the wind was whipping. The wind had to be 20, 25 miles an hour when we were walking in. By the time the game started, it was probably more like 10 to 15. And by the end of the game, it was pretty calm. I'm looking down right now at the flags on the top of the goalposts, and they're moving, but they're not standing straight out like they were before the game.
Drew Chrisman said he had underestimated the wind on his first punt, so early on it was it caught him off guard. I wonder, do you give him the Big Ten Special Teams Player of the Week, or do you give it to Terry McLaurin?
I think you have to give it to Drew Chrisman because I don't know that there's a stat that you can give to Terry McLaurin. There's not a
downs.
It's like balls killed inside the 10. That's not a stat that
probably
anyone knows.
Should be in the Big Ten of all places.
It probably should be, but I mean, here's what it is. Terry McLaurin was not the one being interviewed on Fox after the game. That was Drew Chrisman.
True.
So I think we should go ahead and pre-write that article right now. Drew Chrisman, Big Ten Player of the Week.
It will be the first time ever a Big Ten Special Teams Player of the Week had a 4-yard punt.
And he said after the game, in case you were wondering what the heck happened, because that went sideways. That went 10 rows deep in the stands, like Joe Bowserman passing.
It came right at us. We're at an angle in the press box.
Right.
And the punt should never come at us.
No.
When, we're at, I don't know, was it a 45-degree angle?
Yeah, he said he dropped the ball to kick it, and the wind blew it, and just blew it. It doesn't have to blow it that far. It has to blow it 3 inches, and all of a sudden it hits off the side of his foot instead of the top of his foot, and then it goes sideways.
Yeah,
and
think of it
that's what he said's happened.
As NASA. Think of it like NASA. You don't have to be off by much, but just the slightest, miscalculation with a punter in his shoe.
It was less of a disaster with the punting game than it could be in space travel. So,
well, yeah, arguably.
In my opinion.
In your opinion. So, it was almost like when you knew what was coming.
Right.
And it would, a little from the 40-yard line, only average like 37, 38 yards per punt, which is not great, So, Tom, you don't like punting from inside the 40, and there were times where it was like 4th and 4.
Right.
Your defense is playing really well, which means that you can put them at the 40. If you don't get this, put Michigan State at the 40. It's not going to hurt you. But then the other thought is, if we put them at the 2, we might get a safety, we might get a touchdown, and we saw both of those things happen. So, would you like to come around to Urban's way of thinking, to Kirk Ferentz's way of thinking, to the Big Ten's way of thinking on this, or do you want to stay with your football nerd friends and your Pulaski Academy and never punt.
Yes, I am still hashtag never punt. But it is statistically, when you have the ball on the plus side of the 50 and it's not 4th and 13, right, you shouldn't ever punt, really. Statistically, you're better off going for it because the expected value of the field position and blah, blah, blah. This worked out as well as it possibly could have for Urban Meyer. You are not going to kill 5 punts inside the 5-yard line on any normal day. And it doesn't take much. I mean, you saw the ball blew 3 inches off of his foot and it went sideways. So how much does it have to blow to skip just one extra hop or just fly just 3 feet further, and then all of a sudden you've given up possession on 4th and 4 for a gain of 14 yards of field position?
Well, what would the one where Terry McLaurin made the dive?
That was he said that was the first one.
So where was that from?
That was they were all inside the.
And the thing is, what this does is it confirms to Urban, like, yep, this is how you're supposed to do it. You should always punt from the 34, and you I can't say you got away with it. It worked, but it also could have worked by going for it. The Mark D'Antonio decision to take the safety, and again, we haven't heard what he said about that.
Yeah,
I didn't have a huge problem with that because it just made it a field goal game, and he really did not think much of the Ohio State offense. You could tell, or else he's not going to do that. Where if you punt it and you put Ohio State at the 40 and they score a touchdown, it's over.
Right.
If you give them a safety, make it a 3-point game, and you kick off and they get it at the 30 or whatever, instead of kicking it out of bounds, it was kicking it out of bounds that really killed them on that one and put the ball at the 50. But if you keep them at like the 30 or something, I think it would have worked out better for sure. But once they kick it out of bounds, then you've lost the reasoning, you've lost your justification for it. And not that you had the foresight to know that it was going to be bad, but I don't think it was as egregious as everybody else did.
No, it wasn't an egregious decision. It didn't strike me at the time. Normally you think, oh, when there's a situation towards the end of a game.
Right, it was very early.
When you're leading by 6, that's when you see a team take an intentional safety. This was very early in the game. It was still in the third quarter, I think. And Ohio State was up by 1, so you put yourself in a position where instead of a field goal wins it for you, a field goal ties it for you. So, that's a very unusual time to take it. But strategically, it wasn't a bad decision. This is the inverse of the Urban Meyer bad process, good results. This was not necessarily bad process. You can make a very sound strategic argument for that, but the results were bad because they kicked it out of bounds.
And I saw people saying that he did it because he didn't want it to get his punt blocked. But really, if you get a punt blocked at that point, it's almost going to be a safety like 75% of the time anyway, rather than a touchdown.
Right.
So I disagree with that. I think he just it was about field position. And like Urban said, this was a game of field position. I mean, you saw how badly they were trapped inside the 5 the entire second half. And that's all it took to close this game out. It defeats them physically on the field. It defeats them mentally, and maybe make Drew Chrisman the defensive player of the week in the Big Ten as well.
Draymond Jones said Drew Chrisman and Terry McLaurin were 2 of the biggest defensive stars of the game for Ohio State. That was. Normally a defensive player makes a play and it swings field position, and that's like an interception, really swings field position. That was 5 times they swung field position. And even if just preventing it from going into the end zone, even if you're just saving 15, 17 yards of time to do that 5 times, that's almost the length of the football field. That's, 75, 80 yards there, right there in field position. That's enormous.
And think of the 2 punts that KJ Hill let roll.
Oh.
That was maybe 30, 40 yards of field position there.
Yeah.
And, 1 or 2 of those, 2 of those were key, and you lose 20 yards before you even get started, and you're backed up at your 10 instead of the 30, and that drive is almost over before it starts. And Michigan State had that the entire game, or the entire second half.
Yeah, the KJ Hill thing was interesting because KJ Hill is the one who's out there because he's sure-handed and knows what to do and isn't going to do something silly and isn't going to field a punt on his own 2-yard line and then 2 separate drives. I mean, the first one was pretty egregious, like he should have just caught it. The second one, he would have had to run for it and catch it on the run, and okay, the wind's blowing, it's a little dangerous, okay. But the first one was like you gotta catch that ball
because he backed up and it bounced in front of him.
Right. Yeah. If this is a field position game,
yeah,
you got to play for field position in every phase of the game.
And then after the game, Urban Meyer said they presented Brendan White with the game ball to give to his dad, William White, dealing with the ALS. So that was a good moment for the team. They exploded. Brendan White obviously very happy about that. Talked about it after the game, where it's been interesting to talk to Brendan White the last 2 weeks, when all these things like now I can't wait to get back and see my dad. Mm-hmm. And so this has been a pretty cool last couple of weeks to watch, and it's obviously been much better for Brendan, much better for William.
Yeah, and this is, I feel like going through August and not having talked to the team at all in August, that's usually when you sort of get a sense for some of the storylines for the season. We didn't have that this year because of the whole Zach Smith thing. We didn't talk to the team for literally a month. And so we came into the season, it was just sort of like when you started talking to him, all of a sudden, like, okay, the season's going, now we're talking to him about games, we're not talking to him about all the personal stuff and sort of the storylines that become the narrative arcs of the season.
Yeah, you hit the ground running.
This is the first time you really have had kind of a personal story there, and it's a cool story. I mean, the timing of the video last week at the Nebraska game, Brendan White really kind of stepping to the fore. Now he's a starter. Now he's maybe solved one of the biggest problems on the problem side of the ball for Ohio State. That's pretty cool. This is one of these things where we just heard about it, we didn't get to see it. I'm guessing at some point this week you're going to see a pretty cool video from the OSU social media team where maybe that becomes kind of a rallying cry for this team and becomes a little bit of an inspirational thing. And that's something that this season has kind of been missing. It's just been a weird season. It's been a little flat. It's been a little off. You haven't had a lot of that kind of personal side of this year. This is the first time you kind of get that, and maybe it also serves as kind of an inspirational thing in that locker room as well.
Yeah, it's almost like you start the season with too much inside knowledge of stuff that you don't want to know about.
Yeah.
With the Zach Smith thing and text messages between Urban and his wife, and it's just not the purview, not the inside view that you necessarily thought you'd be dealing with, and then you get shut out. You get frozen out of everything, and there's a lot of stuff going on that you don't know about until something like this happens, and then you get to talk about it and share it with people. And it'll be interesting to see how this continues on, and if Brendan White continues to play like we think he will. Next week it'll be a different opponent. There'll be they're going to put him in coverage more. But right now his confidence is so high, and one of the things he talked about was working so hard at watching film, knowing that he's going to be a starter. You have to prep differently. You have to prepare more. There's more on your shoulders, so you can't go out there and let your teammates down. So you have to be ready for whatever. And 2 games now, he's not been an issue. It's like when Jordan Fuller replaced Malik Hooker last year. Like it wasn't the flash, but it was always just solid, and you never felt like you were missing something there. And since he's been at strong safety these last 2 weeks, you don't feel like there's anything missing.
No, and to have him step up and just be solid. I mean, this is what we said a month ago. You don't need to have an All-American back there. You need to have a Big Ten caliber safety back there. It does not need to be a first-team All Big Ten caliber safety. You need to have a decent safety who can make tackles, take good angles. They did not have that. They cycled through a whole bunch of people at the beginning of the year and didn't have that. Now it seems like maybe you've got a couple guys there where, obviously we've talked a lot about Brendan White. Shaun Wade also played a nice game today, had a nice interception late in the game. That was big. You have...
The corners are all healthy now.
The corners are all healthy. You've got a nickel in Shaun Wade who can potentially solve that issue. You've got Brendan White who could potentially solve that issue. And I'm sure if you didn't listen to our show last week, Brendan White kind of confirmed it again this week, why he wasn't playing before. Because, I'm sure everyone's been screaming about that. Why the heck have you not been playing this guy? We were told last week, I specifically asked him in the middle of the week, hey, what were you not doing that you're doing now? And he said, it's mostly just getting those defensive calls in right. And again, today, someone asked him, what's the difference between last week and this week? He said he was more confident in the defensive calls. You've got the on-field stuff, it seems like maybe has been able to do this all year, and it has been kind of that soft pre-snap kind of stuff,
right.
Not the between the whistles, not that 4 to 6 A to B. He's been fine there probably. It's all the stuff before that 4 to 6 that has kept him off the field. If he's got that figured out now, and he can be as solid as he's been at the safety position, that is a big step for them.
Because he blew up that double reverse throw that ended up being a throw, or almost a throw. But he's around the ball. His coverage, I don't think, was bad today. He was right there. This is the best this secondary has been. When you've got the 3 healthy safeties, everybody has their role now. And Sean Wade can be comfortable. He played a little bit of safety as well today. He would come in every now and again for Brendan White. But now everybody knows their role. They can get comfortable with it, make it better next week, and then be at your best for Michigan. Maybe the linebackers are on their way to doing that as well. But next week could be a totally different game because Anthony McFarland, Maryland running back, is a shifty dude. He's going to be tough. I don't even know if Ty Johnson plays anymore. He gets like 2 carries, but we know what he's capable of. You've seen him. It's going to be a different challenge for the linebackers next week, and it would be good for Ohio State to see them step up like the secondary did today.
If you see them against Maryland look as solid as you saw them look against Michigan State, I think that answers more of your questions about what they're going to look like against Michigan. Yeah. They are not going to shut Michigan out. They're not going to give up 6 points to Michigan. They're going to give up points to Michigan. They just have to not give up 40 points to Michigan. They have to not let Michigan control the ball for 38 minutes. Like, you don't have to. This offense is going to move the ball some against Michigan. They're going to score some against Michigan, but they're not going to score 45 points against Michigan. But they could score 24, 27. I mean, if I told you Ohio State scored 27 points against Michigan, for the first time in probably the last month and a half, you might feel confident that they have a chance to win, that there's a chance the defense holds them under 27 and they have a chance to win.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And maybe it's fool's gold, but it's something that you needed to see happen. And we saw it happen, so possible.
Yeah, I mean, answer cloudy, ask again after Maryland game is the crystal ball answer, or the magic 8 ball answer on this.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you for listening to this Instant Reaction Buckeye Weekly from Ohio, actually from East Lansing, where Ohio State won 26-6 over Michigan State. Make sure to check out the rest of the shows on the Ozone Radio Network. Mondays with the Buckeye Sloopcast, Tuesday with the Silver Bullets podcast, Wednesday with us, Buckeye Weekly podcast, Thursday the Sons of Schmidt, Friday it's back with the Sloopcast, and then Saturdays or Sundays it is us again. Maryland, we don't know what time kickoff is yet. Maybe it has been announced by the time you hear this. Perhaps it is a noon game as Tom checks his phone. Perhaps it is even a 3:30 game. It will not be a night game. And really, it's odd that we are delaying and talking about it now because you probably already know while you are listening, and you don't need that information from us. And Tom does not have the information yet either.
I'm glad you don't need it because we don't have it. So,
so thank you all for listening. Have a good night, have a good day, and we will talk to you on Wednesday. Tom, did you want to sing the theme song out?
No, thank you.
Okay, all right, goodbye.